je m'appelle Tiffany Holden et ce soir je vais expliquer pourquoi je pense que vous devrez apprendre une autre langue. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. My name is Tiffany Holden, and tonight I'll be explaining why I think it's so important for everyone to at least begin to learn a second language. I've studied French at University and Community College for 3 years, and over the course of that time, I not only learned how to order coffee in French, how to book a hotel room in French, how to hopefully not offend people too much with butchering my French pronunciation, but also the value of what it is just to be learning a second language. So tonight, I'm going to explain 3 benefits to studying a foreign language, whether or not you achieve conversationality or fluency, and hopefully persuade you to maybe pick up a Pimsleur CD or download an app for such. Première, utilisons la langue où les gens la comprennent. First off, you can use the language when people around you will understand it. Now that would be the most kind of straightforward reason to learn a second language, is when you're going to Italy, or at the end of next week I'll be visiting Paris. You can be understood by the locals whose language you speak. That's the most obvious reason, or the most obvious benefit for learning a second language. Also, as American tourists, it's also quite respected if you at least attempt the local language and not expect that everybody is going to be speaking English to you. My goal is that when I'm in Paris, I'll be able to communicate a little bit better than parlez-vous anglais, and I'll be able to be like, excusez-moi, est-ce que vous parlez anglais? That sort of thing. A second reason to learn a second language, or at least to start learning a second language, pour utilisons la langue où les gens ne la pas comprennent, which means using the language where the people around you can't understand it. So first, a benefit is getting to use the language where you can be understood. And secondly, using the language around people where you can't. Or more specifically, where select people in your audience can understand, and where select people in your audience cannot understand. Now this played out when I was a missionary kid in the Philippines. I was a missionary kid my first flight was when I was 6 months old, all the way up until I was 9 years old. I lived there. And it came in handy when we would be back on furlough in the United States. I was kind of a hyper child, fairly outgoing, especially after a bowl of ice cream. And so my parents were able to use Tagalog and let me know that my behavior was unacceptable. Ay, naku, Tiffany! Sobra na! Let me know, calm down a little bit. But it wasn't that whole child behave where you're kind of embarrassed in front of your friends. They just let me know kind of through the backdoor route of another language. And my friends all thought that was really cool. So it was a win-win situation. A third reason, and perhaps one of the most important, why I think everybody should at least start to learn a second language if you haven't already, is pour ne pas utilisons la langue, is to not use the language. Because even if you don't use the second language that you started to learn, the very act of trying to learn a second language causes so much brain development and so much cognitive growth in your mind that there's only benefits. There's no negatives. Codia Delastrudi in The Atlantic in October of 2014 compiled the results of several studies, and those students who were bilingual or at least studied a second language, even if they weren't fluent, had higher scores in math, in reading, in vocabulary, in knowing how to weed out the important concepts and weeding out the unimportant concepts and focusing on the important ones. It also helped avoid the onset of dementia, of Alzheimer's, and generic cognitive decline of aging. And how does this happen? It's because of code switching. Now, one of the most important things to learn with anybody who's starting to learn a second language is languages aren't parallel. There isn't an exact back and forth between languages, obviously. There are different words for different concepts, and some concepts are completely cultural. In the Philippines, you'll have different words for the different stages of rice growing, and those are all words for rice. Rice in the field, rice that has been picked but isn't cooked yet, and rice that is cooked will be 3 completely different vocabulary words because of the importance of rice in the Philippine culture. We don't have that in the United States, because that's not even a assuming the different varieties or variants of types of rice. That's just the different stages of production. We'll have completely different words because of the cultural base. So this code switching, this understanding the cultural implications of these languages, and also the syntactical element of language. Different word order in a sentence operates differently in different languages. In English, we have a subject-verb-object setup, and then when you add the pronouns in, the pronouns generally stay after the verb, or in some cases they move before the verb, but in French it's always before the verb. Different things like that will happen differently in different languages. In French, I gave him the book would be je le lui ai donné, which if you transliterate back would be I, it, him, gave. And now going from one language to the next and trying to translate even a relatively simple sentence such as that has this sort of mental energy that is expended because it's bringing us out of our pattern that we're always going in when we're working with simple sentences. But if we work in those simple sentences in a different language, it wakes up our mind and forces us to think about even those simple sentences. So after hearing about these benefits in learning a second language or starting to learn a second language, how you can use it around people who understand it, how you can use it around people who don't understand it, and even how you can avoid using it altogether. I hope that at least some of you will stop by the library, pick up a pencil or CD, maybe download an app that gives you a word of the day in your target language of choice, and just try learning. Just trying a few adjectives, adverbs, throwing a couple sentences together, seeing what happens, butchering the pronunciation just as well as I do. Maintenant, j'espère que vous ayez décidé d'apprendre une autre langue. So now I hope you go and try to learn another language. Thank you.